Jason Unruhe is a political commentator who joins us. So, Jason, you have this incident that has happened in pretty much Iran's backyard, the important strategic waterway of the Persian Gulf. How do you see this event in terms of what transpired? I mean, at this point, the headline is that Iran has thwarted the U.S. attempt at hijacking its oil and its vessel.
Piracy. This is nothing more than common low-level piracy. The United States has very clearly made an attempt to steal the resources of one country for themselves. That is blatant and bald-faced to the entire world. This is nothing less than theft. This is one of the most blatant crimes you could commit against another country. This was very clear to everyone. There was no attempt by the United States to cover this up. There was no using proxy forces or anything like that. This was straight U.S. crime. And what we see is that this is part of a larger strategy to try to harm the oil industry inside of Iran because of the sanctions that they have decided to place on Iran that are essentially not legal. They're not sanctioned by the UN or any other appropriate governing body which would have jurisdiction to do so. The United States has clearly committed a crime, an international crime, which the UN should step in and do something about. In fact, probably most likely, the UN Security Council should do something about the United States' continuous crime. But what we're going to see is the UN turn another blind eye to what it is that the United States is doing. Because for decades, it has essentially served the interests of the United States. So this is another crime that's going to go unpunished. And it shows the level that the United States is going to go to. Their actual sanctions aren't enough to try to destabilize the Iranian oil industry or etc. So they're now going to go up to straight acts of outright theft. And this shows the very petty nature of U.S. foreign policy at this time. There's no public statement, denunciation. It's just sending the U.S. Army or the Navy in as essentially pirates. That's all they were doing here was straight up piracy. And it makes me wonder about the people who signed up to the U.S. Navy, that if this is something that they wanted to do, this is something that they felt was protecting their country. Is that what this is? Trying to stop Iran from sending oil to someone? This is worth risking this could have escalated into sides firing at each other. This could have turned in the small chance it could have turned into a war, or the beginnings of a war. Was that worth it? In the eyes of the United States, this seems to be a yes.
When you take a look at the way that Iran actually conducted itself, based on the footage that was put out there by Iran and the IRGC's conduct, warnings were issued. There was an attack helicopter from the U.S. that was hovering over the vessel, but the IRGC gave out a warning and said that you should leave the area. You're posing a danger, of which the U.S. helicopter did. Iran has stood by its motto of defensive posturing, unless it's going to be attacked. What signal does that send to the world when you see Iran and its army, the IRGC that is, conducting itself in that manner, vis-a-vis the way that the U.S. acted?
Well, very clearly, Iran is acting in a defensive capacity. They did not open fire. They did not provoke a violent incident. They did essentially everything they could to avoid violence taking place. And that sends a very powerful message itself. Iran has made it very clear they do not want a war with the United States. They do not want a war with anyone, which is why they took carefully calculated measures that were specifically set up to try to de-escalate the situation to prevent violence from happening. But as we saw, the United States was trying to provoke that. They were trying to provoke a violent incident and no doubt would use their own provocation as a justification for sending military ships, etc., into the area to harass Iran. And Iran has to play this very carefully, which they have done by taking a purely defensive stance and taking actions which avoid violence. And that sends the proper message.
Thank you very much for that. We appreciate it. Jason Unruhe there, political commentator, talking to us.